Seahawks fans, wherever you may be. Welcome back for another edition of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. Join your host, Bill Alvstad, and co-host, sports writer and football analyst Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football.
Hey, Seahawk fans. Welcome back to another edition of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, sitting down with co-host Keith Myers here to talk NFL draft prospects in our continuing series and looking at all the position groups as we head into the NFL draft in April. This week, we're doing defensive line. So we're at nose tackles and 3-tech defensive linemen, defensive tackles, and should be a fun show packed with all sorts of prospects and good information for you. So welcome in, man.
Yeah, and it starts off with a bang with one of the best defensive line prospects that we've seen in a decade. So
absolutely,
and a guy that I think he's the best defensive line prospect since Ndamukong Suh came out, which will give you an idea. Which I know he hasn't had the greatest career because of some character issues where he liked to step on people and that kind of stuff. But
don't we all, Keith?
He was don't we all? But Suh was a fantastic prospect, a guy that looked as can't miss as you possibly could get. And Jalen Carter this year has that same level of dominance, just in every game, at every snap.
Yeah, he's amazing. I mean, you take a look at all the mock drafts out there, and he's definitely one of the guys that's projected to the Seahawks. So before we get into talking about him specifically, let's talk about the different types of defensive linemen that we're talking about today, particularly two different sets of guys with different attributes for both positions. You want to break that down a little bit?
Yeah, so we're looking at for a 3-4 defensive lineman. So you have the nose tackle in the middle, which is typically a guy that's 320 to 330 pounds, big space eater, block eater, someone that teams need to double team in order to try and move in the running game, and so therefore to eat up that extra block, which keeps the linebackers clean. And then beside them, on both sides, you have a guy that would have been a 3-tech in Seattle's old defensive scheme. And so these are guys that are typically lighter, somewhere between 280 and 305. And they're guys that tend to be more disruptive. They get upfield, they can get into gaps, they can push the pocket, get to the quarterback up the middle. They're more laterally mobile, in the run game, that kind of stuff. So two different guys, but they're all the big guys in the middle of the defensive line. There's no 240-pound guy in this set.
So let's talk about, just for a half second, who have the Seahawks currently have on their roster in 2022 that fits those descriptions. Can you break those down just a little bit so people are just kind of really familiar?
Yeah. So for the nose tackle, you've got Al Woods and Brian Monet, and previously Poona Ford, but he is a free agent still. And then in the other spots, you're looking at guys like Quentin Jefferson. Last year it was Shelby Harris that fit in there. Shelby Harris is there. And guys like that. I mean, so you're looking at, like I said, these are big guys. These are the big bodies in the middle.
And the reason that we're kind of interested in this prospect group is that we ultimately failed as a defense to really stop the run and penetrate the pocket from the interior. Now, we had some success on the outside as far as pass rushing and so forth. And that's why everyone's talking maybe that isn't so much of a position of need. We're pretty stacked at the edge rusher position. If you take a look at players currently on the roster, I'm sure they might bring a guy in because they do almost every year. But at the
you can
top,
never have enough pass rusher.
Right. Everyone's kind of getting excited about the opportunity to draft a real disruptive force in the center. As you take a look at Seattle's defense, we just haven't had that. And a guy like Jalen Carter Keith mentioned is that he's a 6'3", 305 pound, runs under a 5'0", 40, disruptive kind of player. Dismantles blocks coming at him, eats space, does everything you want to as far as defending the run, but his real game is penetration, getting inside to the pocket, disrupting timing, getting to the quarterback, breaking down blocks, and just really wreaking havoc. And Seattle just really hasn't had that for such a long time. I've been wanting this for Seattle's defense beyond that, changing to a 3-4, even as a 4-3, a guy that can be able to do this. And we just haven't had it. And so it's really exciting to have an opportunity possibly at the top of the draft to be able to look at a guy like Jalen Carter as somebody that we could have and come in and really make a big difference in this defense.
Yeah, I mean, the Seahawks pick at 5, and there's a scenario where he is available at 5 because you look at who's above them. If the Bears go in a different direction or they trade down below Seattle, then you could get a run on quarterbacks, and you could get 3 of the 4 picks ahead of them being quarterbacks, and then it all comes down to who do teams view more or higher. Whether it is Jalen Carter or is it
Will Anderson?
Will Anderson, yeah, the edge rusher. And so edge rushers tend to be a little more coveted than interior guys. So you kind of think, okay, well, maybe he'd go first, and then that leaves Jalen Carter sitting there for Seattle. I don't know. If I'd be surprised if Jalen Carter, like I said, unless there's a trade, I think he's gonna be the pick in Chicago at number 1. And so that would be that would kind of be rough for Seattle, because that he is like the ultimate fit and player. But at the same time, that means that someone else is going to drop into Seattle's lap, whether it be Will Anderson or whether it be one of the quarterbacks.
Yeah. And if it's a quarterback, and Seattle's then in a position to take advantage of a trade back potentially, unless they decide quarterback at 5 or quarterback at 6 is what they want to do. If they're going to trade back, and maybe that's Miles Murphy or somebody like that in the 7 to 10 range, that would also be an option. So Jalen Carter, the reason that everyone's excited is this guy's just really the real deal. He's got the quickness, the agility, the force in his upper body and hands, change of direction skills, all that stuff. He's everything you would want to have in a 3-tech guy. Not really, doesn't have. I mean, he could probably play on the end, in certain alignments and so forth. I know Seattle likes to run some hybrid type things in between 4-3 looks and 3-4 stuff. So he's got that ability to kind of stay in there for 3 downs, really.
Yeah, when they go hybrid and they start moving stuff around, he can go. He can play the nose in Seattle's old system like Puna 4 did, or get as far outside as the 5-tech. And brush the passer from there. So he's a versatile guy who's just going to dominate. You go watch him on tape, and he's a lot of the interior of Georgia's defense and why they were so good the last couple of years. He just was unblockable in the middle, and that is crazy. And that's where teams covet guys like this, because they're just they're difference makers on defense. They're the guy that you have to account for in every play. It's like when Seattle goes up against Aaron Donald.
Yeah, interesting. So there's a few guys that we'll talk about today that kind of have the ability to play multiple positions. Can play in a 4-3 front alignment or a 3-4. And one of those guys for me is Miles Murphy. Typically, in a defensive end in a 4-3, but in a 3-4 alignment, he would be kind of your 3-tech, undersized a little bit at 275, 6'5", but he has the speed at 4.57 and the arms at 33 3/4 with a 82.5-inch wingspan. When you look at him play, you look at a guy that can be very toolsy as far as being able to move around the defensive line in all sorts of different alignments and so forth, and does a very good job affecting the pass rush on the interior when he's asked to move inside. And that's why I mention him. Probably end up mentioning him when we do the defensive end edge show as well, just because he can kind of do both.
Miles Murphy reminds me of Michael Bennett. Wins with his first step, being really quick. Does things, he can play on the outside, he can play on the inside, got the ability to chase down a play. I mean, you said his speed, which is crazy for a guy that's 275 pounds. But yeah, it kind of reminds me of Michael Bennett. Again, a guy that is a pass rusher. But he doesn't just have to be a pass rusher. He's also a guy that can, stack a guard and make a play against the run and that kind of stuff. So I like him. I like him in the 3-4. My concern would be that because of his speed, the Seahawks would do what they did to Taylor. Yes. And try and make him an outside linebacker at 275 pounds, which won't work. Yes. And that would be, I mean, we pretty much lost a year of Taylor's rookie contract trying to see if he can be a linebacker, and he's not. He's a guy that needs to be on the line of scrimmage and needs to be moving forward, not backwards.
It also wouldn't surprise me if they elect to do the opposite with Miles Murphy, in that he's got a 6'5" frame, very long, very agile already. You could add 10 pounds of muscle to this guy, and I don't think he would lose much in agility and get him more equipped to play inside full time.
Yeah. Again, like I said, my concern would be that they would try and do the Jamar Taylor route with him, and then that would kind of waste a year, and then they'd figure out, oh, he needs to be on the line, and then whatever. It's not like that would be a Seahawk thing, not a Miles Murphy thing. I think he's an elite prospect.
Yeah. So Daryl Taylor. Yeah. Jamar, Daryl.
I was close.
So who else do you want to talk about? I mean, there's a bunch of guys here in the first, second round. So I mean, we could kind of jump around if you want. I was just kind of going maybe the prospect order.
Yeah. So the next guy would actually be Murphy's teammate, Brian Breesy, 305 pound, 6'5", also fairly quick at 305 pounds at a 4.77 40. Yeah. A guy that is more of a nose tackle, maybe not quite big enough to be a true nose, but in Seattle's defense where it's more hybrid, this guy, he is more of a less of a just unblockable, I'm going to get upfield guy, and more of a guy that's going to like eat space. He's going to make plays, at the line of scrimmage. He's going to be able to chase down some stuff that you wouldn't expect a defensive tackle to. Just a really strong interior player.
Kind of an upgraded version of Shelby Harris, I think.
Yeah, or an upgraded version of Poona Ford.
True. Yes, true. I mean, 6'5", 305 pounds. He's a little longer overall. And I like his grit. I mean, he's really kind of overcome some things. You take a look at his background. He's a more physical player. Poona's got the leverage going for him because he's 6 foot, 305. So he's got that little initial quickness and burst and get underneath pads. Brian Breesy is not that guy. He's going to be, your straight ahead guy, more like Shelby Harris in that respect, I think. But I think he would be a great selection if he was there at like 20. Yeah. I think that he would, especially if Seattle went quarterback first or dropped back and got, a weird pick like a corner or, whatever. This guy would be a good option that you want to be able to address your defensive line. He would be a guy that you could bring in right away and be part of a rotation immediately in Seattle's defense to pair with a guy like Al Woods, in the middle. You put this guy next to Al Woods and another guy on the other side. You've really helped your defense stop the run and help, get disrupting timing in the middle, I think, with him.
One of the things that intrigues me about Breesy is he's only 21 right now. He's young, and he's got a
Yeah.
lot of growth left, both football growth and his ability to put on another 10 pounds. He actually looks slight as far as his frame, because he's at 305, but he isn't the big uh, the big fat guy that most 305-pound guys are. Um he's svelte. There's the word I'm looking for. And he could put on another 10 pounds easy and no one would notice. And he could get himself into a spot where he could be that true nose, and he's only, like I said, he's only 21.
The only reason that we're talking about him at 20 as well is he had an ACL injury, and he's going to have to show that he's fully recovered from that. Still has the explosion and speed in his lower body. And if he does, I think he could probably end up going a little earlier than that in this draft, just because of his intangibles as well, the leadership qualities, the grit, the overcoming adversity type of thing. Seattle's actually really drawn to that. It wouldn't shock me if this is kind of their player that they're really drawn to as far as a prospect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the ACL is a concern. I mean, it's always a concern when a guy's got that injury before he even comes into the NFL, especially as a lineman where you're getting pushed on and there's that kind of force on every play. And so we'll see. The other thing is when you watch him, like sometimes he plays upright and doesn't get his pads underneath the other the guard. And so teams might look at that and be like, okay, that's a technique issue that can be recovered, or they might look at that and see like, well, that's the guy that is going to get pushed back on occasion. I think it's coachable, and I've seen a lot of guys come into the league with that problem and then get coached out of it, so that way they do better. But some NFL teams look at that and they just move you down on the board because you're not ready to play in their eyes. And so I think 20 is a spot, or if Seattle ends up moving down a couple times and they end up in like the range of 14, something like that, Breesy would be an excellent pick.
Now, you mentioned earlier playing a comp towards Poona Ford. This next player for me is that in Kalijah Cansey, the 3-tech defensive lineman out of Pitt, 6 foot, 280 pounds, runs a 4.69. He's a little less weight than Poona does, but he's got that same intensity about him as far as disrupting the pocket, playing with a high motor, just working his ass off in the interior. There's a lot of excitement building about this kind of a player. I think earlier in the draft process, he was looked at being like a 3rd round guy, and everyone's just been watching his film saying, well, he is undersized, he's a little small, he's a little short, etc. But the tape doesn't lie. The guy just plays his heart out, plays really effective, had 30 quarterback hurries, 9 quarterback hits, and 8 sacks in 2022. I think he's the real deal.
Well, a lot of people will automatically think of Aaron Donald, right? Pitt, 6 foot guy who rushes the passer on the interior. I mean, it's kind of a natural.
He has almost the same the specs as a player.
Yeah. Except for I don't think he's as good. I mean, Aaron Donald is Aaron Donald is a generational talent.
Right.
And I think that's unfair to Cansey to put that much pressure on him and be like, hey, you need to be this, because I don't think anyone lives up to that. But Poona Ford's probably a better comp for him. I think he's a little more disruptive. He's smaller. He's not as big as Poona. Poona, it was a better space eater and a guy that could just demand a double team in terms of you can't move him. Whereas Cansey's more of a upfield penetration, get into the backfield, make the running back have to do something before he gets to the hole, kind of run defender, and obviously a pass rusher. So, but Poona Ford went undrafted because of his height. He was a guy that you watch his tape and you're like, this guy's a 3rd round pick, and then he went undrafted because teams were like, nah. They're like, he is shorter than Aaron Donald, and they didn't see it translating, and it translated outstanding. I don't know if Cansey's going to go as high as he should because of the fact that he's not tall and he's not long.
Tell you what, if he was
either.
sitting there with Seattle's second round picks, especially the second one, I mean, it'd be a no brainer for me.
Oh, absolutely.
It wouldn't shock me if they went 37. I think, you're right. I think he's fringy first round, second round, just because of those things, but he has all the attributes and athletic traits and the the veracity of him being just such a hard worker, a workhorse, that those are things that NFL teams really covet. So I think after the combine and the interview process and all that kind of stuff, I think he actually is really close to being first and second round, right in that area. Anywhere between 28 and 35, I think he might go.
Yeah, I think that's about right. Like I said, there are teams who won't have him on their draft board because of his size.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's changed, but you're probably right. I mean, there's certain defensive coaches and so forth that just really need their guys to be certain length and so forth.
Yeah, and I mean, and I keep saying it, but Poona Ford is a good example of why it was stupid that Poona Ford went undrafted. You go watch his tape and everything, and he was a guy that was a third round talent, like potential starter, and nobody touched him.
So we talked about this year being Poona Ford being out of position, not playing in the right scheme, et cetera, and possibly Seattle moving on for him this offseason. We've talked about that. Would this guy have the same issues then coming into a 3-4 alignment?
It depends on how they plan on using him and how they plan on running the defense. Because when Seattle was trying, they both right at the beginning of the year, and then there was another chunk in the middle where they tried to 2-gap all their defensive linemen, where they stack a guard and then shed to either the right or the left, depending on the running play. And it didn't work, and the defense was terrible. And then there were other spots. There was a chunk about a third of the way through the season, and then as we got down closer to the end, where they stopped trying to do that and went back to asking their defensive linemen to be penetrators, and the defense looked really good. If you take a guy like Cansey and you ask him to 2-gap, you're asking for him to get dominated, and it'll look bad. So you want to stay away from that.
All right. So I want to move through these fairly quickly. We're talking guys now, second round to the end of the draft, and just a whole bunch of guys. Let's just kind of bullet point guys at this point, maybe, guys that fit what Seattle's trying to do. At nose tackle, I'll just mention the first guy, and we can go from there. Mazi Smith, I think, Michigan nose tackle at 6'3", 337 pounds, still runs a 4.8, 540. He's going to be one of the most physical prospects in at the combine. Made Bruce Feldman's freak list at number 1 overall.
Yeah, he's a guy. A lot of stuff talking about him as a 3rd round pick. I don't see it. I see this guy going early round 2. And so if Seattle's if they want Mazi Smith, and I hope they want Mazi Smith, they're gonna have to get him with probably that first pick of the 2nd round. Unless the other thing is he's going to come into the combine and he's going to just light it up.
Yeah.
And everyone's going to take notice, and that number might get into the 1st round. And I mean, a big 337 pound nose tackle isn't a position that's typically looked at as a 1st round position.
Yeah. He has one job.
Yeah.
But he does it really well.
He does it really well. And honestly, the Seahawks could use a dominant young nose tackle.
So can you imagine Seattle drafting Jalen Carter at 5 and Mazi Smith at 37, maybe somebody else at 20 on the offensive side, maybe Schmitz or something? I would be so happy. That would be the draft for me.
If you got Jalen Carter at 5 and Mazi Smith somewhere in round 2,
that would solve.
Drop the mic and walk away. It doesn't matter what you, because that takes Seattle's biggest weakness, and you've just added 2 legit elite starters. It's not all that dissimilar to what Seattle did at cornerback last year, where they took their biggest weakness and added a Pro Bowl level starter and a good above average player on the other side. So, I mean, that would be phenomenal.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Mozzie Smith, I don't know why he's falling, or some folks don't really like him and so forth, but he's done everything that you would want to have out of a nose tackle. Plus, he does give you the opportunity. You want him on the field like every down, because he doesn't go away on pass rushing downs. The guy is legit athletic. He's got all the traits that you would want from that nose tackle position, and still affect the pass rusher and disrupt timing on the interior. At 4.85, he's got, like I said, he's super strong, super quick agility for a guy with that length. 33 and 3/4 inch arms, 81 inch wingspan, super strong. His three cone, was just crazy for that size and so forth. He's going to come in and test extremely well at the position at the draft, and I do see him, or at the combine, I do see him moving up. I like him better than the next prospect I would want to talk about, which is Aka from Baylor at the nose tackle position.
Yeah. Sticking with Smith, I will tell you the reason why he's not viewed as like a late round one for the most part. You watch his tape, that there were times when the running play ran right next to him, because it starts one direction, so he starts moving in that direction, and he doesn't locate the ball and realize that it was a counter, and that the running back was coming back towards his backside. There's a lot of that kind of stuff in his tape. So he's impressive, but he needs coaching. He needs to learn play recognition. He needs that kind of stuff. And those are the kind of reasons why he'll fall. But honestly, someone's going to look at him and go, we can coach that. I mean, you can't coach up the ability to be an elite athlete, but you can coach, how to find the football. And so I think that's going to be, he'll drop a little, but not much.
Cool. So, Sayaki Ika out of Baylor, the nose tackle, 6'4", 358 pounds, very slow at 4.50 40. He's just going to be asked to do one thing. He's going to basically two gap and stay in his spot and take up double teams so that he can free up the linebackers to do their job. He's going to stop the run. He's not going to really affect the pass rush very much. That's why I see him going into the middle to late second round.
Yeah, he's not a 3-down player. He's a classic nose tackle, a guy that you have in there on first and second down, or short yardage situations, and then you bring off the field for third down and obvious passing situations. Obvious passing situations includes the end of a game.
Yeah.
Right. And
he can do that for you. I mean, he did
not well.
In 2021, he had 33 pressures, 24 hurries, and 6 sacks.
I think he was also at like 315 pounds in 2021, and he continued to put on weight to be their nose tackle.
No sacks last year.
Yeah, if he trimmed down and went from 358 to 328, maybe you could get more interior push out of him. But he's a nose tackle, and I think it's important that you just recognize he's a nose tackle, and you're going to use him as a nose tackle. And but man, he's a mammoth human being.
Yeah, no, he's still a good value pick, I think, and would fit what Seattle's trying to do in stopping the run, especially if you brought Al Woods back. Al Woods is coming back, I believe, right? Or is he free agent? I can't remember now.
He's coming back, yeah.
But a guy like this to pair with that in a rotation would be a nice find for Seattle, for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Why don't you mention some guys now?
So there's a bunch of guys in here that I don't think fit Seattle. They're defensive ends, they're more edge players, and so I'm going to skip over some and jump down to Zach Harrison out of Ohio State. He's honestly though, he's a guy who's small for what they're what Seattle wants to do. He's 6'6", but only 272. But that's
small.
He's small for defensive lineman. He's more of an edge player.
But look at his speed,
especially with 4.4 140. He's an edge player. But Matt, you go watch his tape. He attacks upfield really well, and it's because of that speed and the combination of that speed
With the length.
With the length and size he has, he bends really well around the corner. He's going to be one of those freaky athletes that you can do a lot of things with. And I think that the Seahawks will need to, if they went that route, you don't just line him up at the, on the defensive line and leave him there. You move him around. You put him at linebacker. You put him at defensive end. You
This guy's one of my favorite prospects, I have to admit. I mean, if this guy's sitting there in the second or third round and Seattle thinks that this guy's a value, he kind of reminds me of Miles Murphy. He's that sort of a player, but he's faster, he's longer, and when he kicks inside, he's got the scheme diversity. I do see him, probably playing 3-tech, but he has so much speed and his explosiveness off the line of scrimmage dictates that he's going to rush the passer from the outside as well. So I think Seattle would be kind of interesting for me as a fit for him, in that they could use him all over the place. Whenever
I do mock drafts, he ends up in my draft for Seattle, and in part because I think that the consensus big boards out there have him too low still. And that's how he ends up there. Because they've got it, he's thought of like being a player that's in the 70s, right? And he's not. He's going to be a guy that goes in the 50s. So
fun. What do you think of Keon White in the same sort of role? Georgia Tech and 3-tech.
Similar player, not as long, not as fast, a little bigger, but same role. He's another freaky athlete that can kind of do a lot of everything. Maybe you're not going to move him quite around as much. You're not going to see him with his, standing up at linebacker more. He's going to be more of a 5-tech kind of guy. You can have him on the in a 3-4 defensive lineman, especially if you offset slightly and push him out one gap and run things from there. He's gonna be a pass rushing specialist. Not that he can't do other things, but he's just gonna be really good at being a pass rusher. It just with just that combination of length and size and speed. I mean, both of those guys are. They're fun prospects. They really are.
White really showed up at the Senior Bowl, so something to watch. Go ahead.
So, Tuli Lodu.
Yeah.
Right.
Something.
I butchered that as high as possible.
The defensive end, 3-tech guy from USC.
6'4", 290 pounds. Out of USC, he is he's not the nose tackle, the other defensive lineman in Seattle's scheme. I think this is a really good scheme fit for Seattle. He wins, with the whole speed to power thing. Good feet. He's has developed a bunch of pass rush moves. He's not a one-trick pony. Good balance. He's a guy that I think you can have him come in and rush up the middle and actually get there. Teams are gonna look at him and be like, oh, well, he's not a 5-tech because he can't get around the corner. Okay. That's not what you're going to ask him to do in Seattle. Correct. You're going to ask him to move in a gap from there. And
I agree. And he comes in at 290 pounds now, but I think that teams like Seattle would have him bulk up a little bit, play specifically a 3-tech role, and maybe come in at 300, 305. And he's still running like a 4.97 40. You're probably going to be a 5.0 guy, similar to Shelby Harris, I think.
Yeah. And that's kind of the comp. He's Shelby Harris, only 10 years younger and and a lot cheaper. And he's a guy that when I do these drafts, I'm always looking at going, yeah, he's probably a Seattle guy. So I should, if I haven't taken one of the other players at that position earlier, he's kind of my fallback option. And I don't feel bad about it.
How about some nose tackles in this draft? Guys that are just playing at the 1-tech.
So I think the next one down on my list would be Jocelyn Roy, out of LSU. He's 6'4", 315. He's a little small for a true nose, but honestly, I think that's where he ends up because he just doesn't have that explosiveness to get in between a guard and tackle and really get upfield. He's more of a bull rush, push guys type of thing. But he's really smart in that he recognizes what's going on, watches the quarterback, gets his hands up, has a lot of deflected passes, and I do think he's kind of a true nose. I wouldn't be surprised if a team got him up to 325 pounds, just so that he could be that spot. But he's a guy that you're probably looking at a 3rd round pick for, maybe a little later. I mean, he's definitely someone who isn't going to be highly coveted, but I think can be really useful at the next level.
I think Gervin Dexter Sr. out of Florida is similar. Can play nose tackle, can move out to 3 tech at 6'6", 312 pounds, runs a 4.8, 240. He's a little longer of a prospect, a little quicker on the inside. That would be interesting to me.
A little less polished, a little more raw overall, which isn't necessarily a bad thing when you're talking about 3rd round picks, because you don't want them to be done developing, right? You want there to be a ceiling for them to reach for so they can get better. And so, yeah, Dexter is definitely one of those guys that to keep your eye on.
Another guy I think that will end up putting on weight is Keanu Benton out of Wisconsin. Yeah, he came into the Senior Bowl at 6'4", 312 pounds, runs a 5.36 40. He's got the body type and so forth to add another 10 to 15 pounds of muscle and could really play the nose tackle effectively in Seattle's 3-4 scheme while still being somewhat disruptive a little bit as an attack kind of player on 3rd down.
I don't know if I agree with he has room on his frame because he's a very stocky guy already. I don't think that he adds weight well. Maybe over time, over a couple of years, to put on additional muscle, but you can't just bulk him up quickly, in my opinion. And so he is a nose tackle, but he's a little light for that. I really think he belongs in a 4-3 where he can play, the nose in that, or just an interior defensive lineman and move back and forth. But that's not going to preclude him from being drafted by Seattle and being used both as a nose and as a 3, and being asked to do kind of everything on the defensive line, because I think he can do it.
Interesting. There was another guy. There's a whole bunch of 3 tech prospects in the middle rounds, 3 to 5th round. And I'm trying to find the one guy the nose tackle that I was thinking about.
DeAndre Coburn out of Texas.
Yeah.
344 pounds, 6'2", runs a 5.28 40, so not quick. But he is rather compact for 342. I mean, he's built like a true nose tackle, but in Texas, they moved him around. They put him on the edge and let him just overpower defensive or offensive tackles that are used to dealing with speed guys, much like Seattle did with Red Bryant when Pete Carroll came in, and they moved him from the inside to he was a weird defensive end, but they moved him all over that defensive line in Texas, and just was able to do a lot of things.
He's a good leverage player, very strong, stout, stocky, not too long at all, with 32-inch arms, and not a huge wingspan.
He's 6'2",
6'2", yeah.
But he gets under people's pads, knows how to use his leverage. I think, he looks like a guy that he's not gonna be an early pick, but man, he looks like he could have a long career as a nose tackle that just bounces around, kind of an Al Woods type.
Yeah.
That just is always on a roster.
that I was thinking about that's a little longer than that is Jared Clark out of Coastal
Yep.
Carolina. Played at the Senior Bowl, 6'4", 343 pounds, runs a 5'2", 40, but he's got 33 and 7/8 inch arms with an 82-inch wingspan. Maybe Seattle is more attracted to a player like that for the length, so that he provides a little bit more scheme diversity.
Yeah, he's taller, he's longer. He so therefore has more of a traditional NFL body. The one concern I would have in him is, I mean, he played at Coastal Carolina, so he's not used to playing against talented guards and centers. He's used to playing against guys that he can just physically overwhelm. And so when that's not the case, when you're in the NFL and you have to win not just with athleticism, but a combination of athleticism and technique, can he put all of that together? I mean, he's more of a project, but there's a lot to like there. I mean, there's a lot to like there.
Late round guy with the similar attributes that I'm thinking 6th, 7th round. Seattle's looking for a guy. They haven't addressed that position earlier. Would be like Broderick Martin out of Western Kentucky, 6'5", 337 pounds, runs a 5'2", 40, extremely long at 34 and 3/8 arms with an 84 and an 8 wingspan. Just a run stuffing mauler on the inside. There's a whole bunch of 3-tech guys we probably passed over.
So many.
There's so many, and I think everyone just kind of needs to do a little bit of homework. Byron Young, the edge guy, the end 3-tech guy out of Alabama. Isaiah McGuire, the Missouri 3-tech. There's a lot of guys. Carl Brooks from Bowling Green, a smaller college guy. Mike Morris, the Michigan guy. I like personally, in like say a 4th round prospect, I really like Mike Morris.
One last guy that I want to make sure that we mention would be Moro Omojo. I probably screwed that up, out of Texas. Yep.
Yeah.
He's 293 pounds. He's 6'3", but he's got 34 and 3/8 inch arms at 6'3". So he's got that wingspan. He's broad-shouldered, plays with a lot of suddenness for a guy that size. Gets upfield in between the guard and the center very quickly, and has a lot of developed pass rush moves in terms of what he does with his hands, how he sets people up. Sheds blockers really well. So when blockers get in on him, he's able to get off of them. He does that because he's got those long arms. He doesn't get people up into his body, and so he's able to keep them back and do stuff. Now they used him a lot on the outside as like a 5-tech in Texas, and that's not where he's going to live. In the NFL, he's an inside guy at that size. He just doesn't have the ability to get around the edge because he's a defensive tackle, not a defensive end. But that's where they needed him. And so I think that teams will look at his tape and be kind of unimpressed, but recognize that he was being used in the wrong, out of position.
I think this is a great draft opportunity for Seattle overall, this draft class at the defensive lineman position, because of the depth. There's just a bunch of guys in the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th round that are going to be able to come in and make this roster just because of the weakness we have currently on the roster at the position. And, I think that most of the guys that we've been talking about are upgrades compared to what we've had both in the practice squad and on the roster. And it lines up with the prospects available in the draft. So I see Seattle coming away with three guys probably on the defensive line in this draft.
Yeah. This is a nice combination of Seattle's needs lining up with what the draft has. There's not a lot of, other than Carter and Bracey, there's not a lot of 1st round talent. So you'll hear people say that this is not a good class for defensive linemen, but go a little deeper, get into the 2nd round, into the 3rd round, and the 4th round, and you realize this is a really deep class. There's a lot more guys than usual in those rounds. So you're going to be able to get some guys. Yeah, I would be shocked if Seattle came away from this draft without getting 2 interior defensive lineman.
Yeah.
I really would be.
That's why it wouldn't shock me if the draft fell a certain way at 5 and 20, if Seattle did not select a defensive player in the first round. And I know a lot of people are going to be freaked out about that and just kind of like screaming at the Seahawks during the draft and on Twitter and so forth. But there's so much depth at the position in both the 3-tech and the nose tackle spot that you can get guys that can come in and be part of a rotation, which Seattle does.
Seattle rotates players
into the fourth round. Excuse me.
But yeah, I mean, you could go down. You can get with guys that we've talked about, Mozzie Smith, if they don't as a starter at the nose tackle, and then a bunch of guys that we skipped over because there's just too many to talk about in this draft. But Tuli Piloto out of USC in a round later to be a 3-tech and develop those guys, and so that they're the 2 starters a year from now. That would be a great draft to get 2 starters on the interior defensive line in the same draft. So, and that doesn't involve using any first round picks.
Right. Because they may end up going best player available. The draft may not fall the way that they need it to fall. Maybe they drop back from 5 and into the 10 range, and guys they've got their big board is aligned completely different from what we're thinking and how mock drafts typically go and so forth. You just never know. Okay. So let's get out of here. Next show coming up is going to be our mock draft 2.0 show. That should be a fun one as well. Excuse me. So stick around for that. You can find Keith on Twitter at Myers NFL. You can find me at NW Seahawk. You know where the show's at. Find us on your favorite podcast platform and YouTube, and make sure you hit that subscribe button when you do. And so we'll see you next time, guys. Take care. Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NW Seahawk. Keith is at Myers NFL. And the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.